Now, knife crime offences in London have nearly doubled under Sadiq Khan, 86% rise in the last decade. In any other world, of any other bad area of society, you'd like to think, I don't know, accidents in the workplace, for example, a TV falling off the wall and hitting you on the head, that kind of health and safety. All of that stuff, from 10 years ago, it's always getting better. They find new and innovative ways to make everything safer so that people don't cut themselves or, chop off their own foot while cutting bread or something if you work in Bokits, wherever. But knife crime, no. I mean, this... You might think by now, wow, 2025? Surely not. Yeah, it's got worse. 86% rise in the last 10 years. The West End is now a growing hotspot, accounting for almost 15% of all knife crimes across the capital. 5% of robberies, 0.6% of theft from a person, that's like your mobile phone or your bag, was solved last year. This is the Policy Exchange report calling for zero tolerance policing and a return to tougher stop and search tactics. Let's speak with Norman Brennan, former police officer, over 30 years in the job. He's been a victim of knife crime and he's certainly worked in this field for a long time. He's a media commentator on very much gun and knife crime and the effects of homicide. Norman, look, we're here again, Norman. You and I first spoke about this about 23 years ago, I think, and here we are in 2025 thinking by now it would have got better, and it's got worse.
Well, I've been campaigning on knife crime, Ian, for over 30 years. 15 years when I was a serving police officer. As I've said to you many times, I saw what was coming. I saw what was coming as a serving police officer, and we're the ones that know what's going on the streets. I don't really know what more to say. That nobody seems to get a grip on it. There's so much that needs to be done. There is so much that can be done, but nobody ever does anything. And even this government, when they come into power, what was their first promise? We're going to cut knife crime by half in 10 years. Well, no government is able to cut it by 5%, let alone 50% in the last 35 years. So what is it that spectacularly she's going to do any different from anyone else? And not only that, Ian, we haven't got the police officers. The public rarely see a police officer on the street for the everyday routine crimes, shoplifting, theft of their vehicle, theft of their bike, burglary, robbery. And only 3 weeks ago in Knightsbridge, a very young man, 24 years of age from Hampshire, was stabbed to death in Kensington for his Rolex watch. Life has become so cheap and nobody seems to be able to find a solution. Well, I've been suggesting them for 35 years. I might have been speaking to a brick wall. Yeah.
What is the solution, Norman? I mean, I think I've got some ideas, but if you had to encapsulate that into a few sentences, what needs to be done that could, I mean, you're never going to put a stop to all criminality, but dramatically reduce what's going on?
Well, when I went to 10 Downing Street in full uniform as a serving officer on the 13th of December 2004 with black and white families from London who have been bereaved by knife crime, what we suggested was this: 5 years mandatory prison sentencing for anybody that carries a knife on the streets without lawful authority or reasonable excuse. What a massive impact that would have. 3 years if you're a juvenile. Mass stop and search. If we actually went out and people knew that there was a likelihood they would be stopped and they would face punitive punishments like I just suggested, I promise you, Ian, within a year it would dramatically reduce. Also, we need personal and parental responsibility. Nobody seems to take responsibility for their children carrying knives on the streets and then wondering why some of them don't come home. Then, of course, we look at mentors and we do a national education programme. What the public want is just one promise to be made and kept that is effective. I don't see any promises made. All I ever see, and as I'm sure you see, is smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and we seem to be in that same place where things like stop and search, which I think most logical-minded people will say you need a mass, and you just said it, Norman, a mass acceleration of that. You could have certain days, and you wouldn't necessarily tell the criminal fraternity what days they will be, but you can get, the chief can sign it off so there's a certain order where you will be out there, and absolutely, you see those characters on the street, you are going to go for it as the police. But that gets a lot of resistance. oddly across parties as well. Even, the Conservatives will now say in power, in opposition, yeah, we need more stop and search, but they didn't really do much about it. In fact, it reduced under Theresa May, for goodness sake.
Yeah, Ian, I don't know what it is within policing and governments. They seem to be frightened of certain sections of the community that always complain if they're stopped and searched.
Yeah.
Well, I was in a robbery squad for 6 years. I didn't go out and stop the colour of the skin. I looked at the statistics, the dynamics, who was committing the crime, and my team and I went out, and that's who we directed our stop and search on. Now, all of these different groups that keep on saying, well, we're sick and tired of being stopped and searched. Well, Ian, I've sat down with dozens, if not hundreds, of families, young mothers and fathers, that have just planned a funeral rather than a bright future for their child. And they're sick and tired of their children being murdered, their communities being held to ransom, and people feeling that they cannot walk the streets in safety. Now, the community leaders and those certainly within the black community in London, it's about time they looked within, looked in the mirror, and actually started taking responsibility for issues and problems that they are partly responsible for and that they can find the solutions for, rather than blaming the police and anybody else. And they never seem to, Ian, come up with an alternative solution to stop and search. All they do is damn it. And the thing is, it's their own communities, Ian, that are losing lives, being maimed and being seriously injured and living in fear.
And in addition to that, we also have this other statistic in this research as well, in this report from the Policy Exchange, that says the amount of cases that are solved is at record lows as well. 5% of robberies, 0.6% of theft from person cases. So these are the characters that go around on bikes and nick your phone or your bag and stuff like that. Very hard to catch them. Dwindling police numbers doesn't clearly help, but you might think the amount of CCTV that's out there now would help. What do you put this down to, Norman? Because these, again, are very damning figures if we're not solving crime even when we see it.
I'll tell you what I put it down to, Ian. Neglect. I would hold certain government ministers and home secretaries to account for malfeasance. That is when you're in a public office, you fail to carry out your duty effectively. Now, let me cut through all of this nonsense, Ian. I'm getting old now. I've been campaigning for 35 years. I've said the same thing 35 years ago. Let me tell you how serious it really is. And this should shock people, but it probably doesn't. We are in anarchy. Gun crime, knife crime, violent crime, shoplifting, antisocial behaviour, theft of Rolex watches, 88,000 mobile phones stolen on the streets of London, no-go areas, people frightened to travel to London, people wanting to get out of London. And it's not just London. Knife crime is an epidemic nationally. It's a cancer. And Ian, I'll leave you with this thought. We are brilliant at finding penicillin and cures for illnesses. However, we don't seem to be able to have the ability to invest in our future and find a cure for knife crime that blights society and is a national epidemic and an embarrassment. And it's seen throughout the world that Britain has a serious problem that it just can't tackle and cure.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. We can't tackle and cure it. Norman, always passionate stuff, and great to see you again. Looking well. Norman Brennan, former cop, but a very frustrated former cop, did over 30 years. He was a victim of a knife attack as well. I mean, an absolutely horrific knife attack, only just about pulled through, but he's dealt with it as a police officer. He's campaigned for it, even when he was in the job as a police officer, and subsequently, since leaving